Enigma of the Mill. Everyone asks me what that means. Enigmatic. My focus in my art these days for the last 20 years has been finding art in unexpected places. Finding ready-made art. Marcel Duchamp was my main mentor. I met him when I was 23 years old.
In Minneapolis?
In Minneapolis. And he influenced me greatly. He was famous for ready-mades. And I have made almost a profession out of finding art in the sugar mills of Maui. And a lot of people don't quite understand why I would look in a sugar mill for art. But I find the mill full of patina and colors and designs and metal. It's extraordinary to me to see what's in that mill. The mill, on one hand, is an ugly, dirty place. It's dangerous, polluting, and creating a product that's really not that good for you. On the other hand, I'm finding beauty in it. I'm finding beauty even in, I take my camera and I put it on a 3D microscope and I film sugar crystallizing under the 3D microscope, and it's beautiful. Enigmatic. It's enigmatic that I'm finding beauty in this ugly place. So I created a show, a museum show called the Enigma of the Mill.
When you made it?
This was first presented 10 years ago at the Maui Arts and Cultural Center in the Schaefer International Gallery. It was a big show with projections 18 feet high and 140 feet across, sound system. It was a 45-minute show with musical soundtrack and sounds.
Tell us a little bit about your background. I know that you're coming from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
My life is in about 4 chunks. The first chunk is Minneapolis. Growing up, I was a criminal.
What kind?
I did armed robberies and stealing tires and hubcaps and breaking windows. I was a bad boy.
Oh.
I like the excitement of it, the crime. I don't know what it was, but the excitement.
Well, all artists, they love the crime, I think, because of...
Well, I overdid it, and I'm ashamed of the things that I did, but I was a bad boy. I graduated barely from high school and got my girlfriend pregnant and had to marry her.
How old were you?
I was 17.
17?
Yeah. So I was a father then, and then I got divorced. And then I worked in a department store as a display man.
What does it mean?
I did window display and interior display, working with fashion and color and design. And I had a wonderful mentor there. So that first part of my life was that, crime, married, working in the department store. I spent a year in Brazil looking for my fortune. Came back, went to the University of Minnesota for 1 year.
You were about like 23 when you came?
I went to Brazil at 20.
At 20.
Came back and went to the university for a year, dropped out. I wasn't a very good student either. And I discovered art at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. And I wrote a paper about Rembrandt. And I started working at the Art Institute as an assistant to the director. And a little while after that, a friend of mine was opening an art gallery. I helped him with it. He didn't show up one day. He was an alcoholic. He lived in his car, and I never saw him again. So I ended up with the art gallery. I called it the Bottega. Named after a gallery I'd lived in Wichita, Kansas. And so the Bottega Gallery was the big, huge thing in my early years. This was a gallery, 1963, 64, 65, downtown Minneapolis, art gallery. I was living in a loft, the first loft in downtown Minneapolis.
One question, does that mean that you started with this gallery by chance?
Totally by chance.
And it was kind of your first step into the artistic world?
Yes, yes.
How old were you?
23.
23.
Yeah.
Interesting. And how long you worked in that?
I had the gallery for about 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
May I ask you more about your mentors? So you already mentioned Marcel Duchamp, and I know that you kind of associate yourself with him.
In a way,
In a
yes.
way, right?
Somewhat of an alter ego.
Of
Yes.
course, he was probably your main mentor, but could you say something about other mentors that you had?
Sure. My first mentor was my older brother, very much involved in the art world and culture. Had a huge influence on me. His name was Donald, and he died about 10 years ago. The second mentor was Joe Wright, who was my boss at the department store in the display department, an elegant man, wonderful painter, a world citizen, super cultured, very influential in my life. A lot of style. He had a office that was all white, and he had a big cage on his desk that looked like the Taj Mahal, and in the cage was a black crow that sat there with him when he worked. It was quite interesting. And he was full of ideas, and he painted me a few times, but he was a big influence. When I had my art gallery, Duchamp was huge in my life. He came up to my gallery when I invited him and entered himself in my show. I told him I was doing an exhibition of found art, and he said, "I'm not making art anymore, but I will enter myself."
How much time you spent with Duchamp?
Spent the day with him.
Just a day?
Just one day and a night. We had dinner. We spent the time in my gallery. I showed him my artwork.
But he made quite a huge influence on you, right?
Huge. Well, the main thing was he saw my artwork. He saw my erotic collages.
Which were in that gallery?
Yes.
Okay.
And he really appreciated them. He said they were the freshest things he'd seen in years.
Mm-hmm. How old he was when you met him?
He was about 63.
63.
Yeah.
Well, he was quite a personage, right? He was a artist, he played chess, and
he
did so many things in his life.
Absolutely. Revolutionized the art world.
Does that mean so that also influenced you to
break rules?
Break rules,
yeah.
And kind of made your life in this way, because I know that you do many things. Mm-hmm. You're an artist, you're a filmmaker, you're a sculptor. Then later we'll talk about other stuff as well.
Okay.
So
another mentor was Basil Langton. He was an artist and a actor and photographer. He came up to my gallery, and we developed a friendship that lasted for 35 years. And we corresponded. I've made a book of our correspondence and the collages we sent back and forth. He was a huge influence on me.
So it's lasted for 35 years. And did you collaborate in other ways?
Collaborated, yes, a few things. He did a few things for my magazine. He did a cover. He did an article.
The magazine, which is Maine.
Maine magazine, yeah.
Can you tell more about this project? Because I know it's not that long. It lasts just for 2 years. But you showed me some of examples of that magazine. It's pretty incredible. Tell how it started. What was the first idea to bring it out?
Well, the whole idea for the magazine was, I went to Russia in '85 as a citizen diplomat. I was with 80 people. We wanted to make peace between America and Russia. We felt the government was not doing a good job.
It was the right moment.
So Glasnost was starting, Gorbachev had just come in, and we went as a group, 80 of us, and it was a mind-bending experience.
Excuse me, just one more question. all artists or
No, a group of people.
group of people?
Every kind of person. There were yoga teachers and gold dealers, and there was
And
photographers.
not only Americans.
These are mostly Americans.
Mostly Americans.
Yeah,
And how long time you spent in '85 in Moscow?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I went back for another 2 weeks to help lead another group. But the experience was so powerful for me.
It was your first trip to Russia.
Yeah, oh,
to
yes,
Soviet
it was
Union.
fantastic. And the people that I met photographers and artists, and we connected, and we had great relationships. And I came back from that experience, and I thought, I'm so lucky to be an American at this time. I could do anything I want. Some people I saw in Russia couldn't even have a Xerox machine. And I thought, I'm lucky, I can do anything. So I thought, I'm going to start a magazine. Because I was very influenced by Andy Warhol and his interview magazine. He said he started that magazine just to be able to get into the New York Film Festival free. Mm-hmm. So I started the magazine. And it was in Venice at the time. It was very lively.
It was hard to start because I assume in Los Angeles in general was a huge amount of different magazines in arts especially, right?
It wasn't hard for me. I just started it. I just did it. And I had a lot of help. I had a man named John Van Hammersveld who was a graphic designer, and he helped me organize it graphically.
So is it just two-man crew, or you had another?
No, I had a lot of people come through. I had people helping sell ads. I had people helping with production. I had an art director. I had assistants. I went to a huge printing company in Compton.
I see the little example of the front page of the magazine. Could you
Yeah.
show that?
Yes. This is
The
main magazine. And here's another cover. This is Harry Kipper, one of the Kipper kids. They were performance artists at the time. Mm-hmm. And the whole magazine was devoted to art, architecture, design. It was an amazing experience for me.
So tell me more about when you came from Soviet Union. I guess it was quite an experience that time, especially spending 2 weeks with all those people and meeting artists, as you mentioned. What kind of influence you brought from Soviet Union?
Well, I did a show there at the Maltese Embassy of slides and photographs of my view of Los Angeles, the art of LA.
So it was kind of pre-organized by the time when you came?
No, I did it there. It was spontaneous.
Just spontaneous.
I met the Maltese ambassador, and he liked what I was doing, and so he gave me a show.
Cool.
And I met two very nice artists, photographers, Valery Plotnikov and Victor Brel. One was in Moscow, one was in St. Petersburg. And I really connected with them, and they were very helpful, and we had a lot of fun together. As a matter of fact, Victor and I made scarecrows. You know what a scarecrow is?
No.
You put it in your garden to scare the birds, right? So we thought, who's the ugliest one of us? And let's make a scarecrow of the other person, put it in the garden, and see if it scares the crows. So I made one of him, and he made one of me. We put them on.
It was just carton painting?
Just cut and paste collage photographs.
Interesting. I assume that there will be quite a lot of young Russian artists watching this later. So I would like to ask you to tell more about the culture. I know it was a very brief introduction, but what can you say about the culture of Soviet Union in 1985?
Well, of course, the first thing that hit me was the ancient culture and the architecture and the heroic paintings and the Hermitage and the, incredible things.
You went both in Moscow and St. Petersburg, right?
Both. It was just amazing for me. But then to meet the artists and to go into the communities, I met sensitives, and I met dissidents, and I met activists, Joseph Golden, and then I met the Vladimir Posner, the journalist, and wonderful.
Did he interview you?
Well, he helped us because we would bring people to his apartment and he'd explain communism to us. And he'd explain the Soviet Union to us. And he spoke our language. And he had the background from living in America.
He lived in Paris and he lived in New York
Yes.
for a long time.
So we could relate to him. And we believed him. And he talked to us about the feelings of the Soviet people and how they felt rejected and how they didn't like NATO and this and that. And it was a whole different viewpoint. So it was wonderful to be illuminated by him and other people that we met. And then we go into the galleries, into people's homes. And
any language barrier by that time?
well, I couldn't speak Russian. I had to learn how to say.
I mean, talking with local artists.
We had some translators, and I'm sure that I was followed, and I'm sure that the Interpol or whatever they were called were monitoring what we were doing. I was barely sleeping. I was going 20 hours a day, photographing everywhere and meeting people, hitchhiking. I mean, it's crazy what I did. And the people that were with me, it was so emotional. We cried a lot when we saw the memorials in St. Petersburg, when we saw various things that were, difficult. We cried and we connected and we felt a camaraderie with the Soviet people that I had never felt before. I thought they had horns and were trying to kill us when I was growing up, but now it was different.
One quite particular question. I know you don't drink at all now, probably you used to.
No, I never did.
Never did.
Never had a beer.
But
never had a glass of wine.
In Russia, in Soviet Union, we never had any kind of drugs. So a lot of artists, they used to communicate and used for creation a lot of alcohol. So did you ever ended up to drink with somebody?
No. Kind of an enigma.
Okay. Anyway, so we do not have that much time. I would like to ask you more about people that you used to work with in California when you moved to California, right? Can you tell us briefly why you moved to Los Angeles and when it happened?
Went to visit a friend who was in the film business, an actor friend of mine, Michael Blodgett. I went to visit him. He was my best friend. I got to California, and the first week I was there, he got me a job on a movie that he was doing. They needed an artist to body paint some topless dancers for a Roger Corman film called The Trip. It was written by Jack Nicholson, starring Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda. So
You met Jack by that time?
No. I met a girl that Michael Blodgett knew, a large-breasted girl. I painted her breasts, and we took her to Roger Corman's office, and he hired me like that. Here I was in Los Angeles for 4 days, and he hired me. I was only planning to stay for a week, and I was going to go to London.
So that didn't mean when you came alive, you had just like one major contact. That's it.
One contact, and magic happened. Got a job painting for the movie.
And it was 19...
This was 1966. Then we went to the Monterey Pop Festival and saw the musicians play. Ravi Shankar and Jimi Hendrix burned his guitar. And things were happening. And so I stayed. I got a house on the beach, had several girlfriends, and created an arts studio and did commercials and did paintings and did sculptures and helped my friend on his TV show. He had a show called Groovy.
Santa Monica, California, it's Groovy.
Hello and welcome to the show that is happening on the beach in Southern California. The weather's beautiful and everybody's...
And I'd go to the Venice Artist Studios, people like Dwayne Valentine, and I'd get some of their art, put it in a truck, take it down to the studio, and have it as sets for the TV show. The same sculptures are now in the Museum of Modern Art. The artists have become so famous. There was Valentine and Bell and Freddie Eversley and
What an incredible period. You can imagine.
Ed Moses.
When you came 1966, by that time the cool school still existed and
Yes, he did very much. Bankston was the king, and Larry Bell, and Ed Moses, and Kenny Price, and Keen Holtz. I mean, they were all very active and very exciting, influential, and fun. I used to swim in the Penguin Swim with Billy Al Bankston. Every January 1st, we'd all jump in the water and swim. It was a kind of a yearly event. Some of the artists rented from me when I started developing the Hotel's St. Charles. This was an old hotel. It was full of...
In which part?
Right on the beach in Venice. And my partner, Roger Webster, and I bought this hotel and totally renovated it and would lease space out to creative people.
So we're slightly moving to this part of the real estate experience. You mentioned Roger Webster. So tell how you met Roger.
Roger lived, he was living in a place called the Pink House nearby where I lived in Venice on the beach. And he started an organization with David Greenberg and Ted Tanaka, the architect, and Bernard Perloff. It was called Environmental Communications. And I joined the group. We would create slides, series, and we'd sell them to universities and to museums and to magazines and libraries. We'd photograph Los Angeles, but I would see it through different eyes. Had just come from Minneapolis, so I'm seeing the pop architecture, the buildings shaped like hot dogs and donuts and ladies' shoes, and I'm photographing all that. I'm seeing the neon signs. I'm photographing the neon signs. I'm seeing the Egyptian architecture, the modern architecture. I'm seeing the billboards. I'm seeing the freeways. So I'm documenting. And that's what we did as a group. Did documentation of Los Angeles, West Coast, 1975.
So
That's where I met Roger.
Special questions. What is photography for you? Because I know it's art for you. You spend quite a lot of time traveling photography. There is a big difference about the way of understanding photography in Europe and in America. In America, photography is more documentation. Even if you look at the artworks of the great artists such as Webster, you always usually see the documentation. There are no any settings. They just pick the moment. So there is no any preparation. What's photography for you?
It's so natural. It's a part of my life. It's like the back of my hand. I mean, for the last 50 years, I've always had a camera in my hand. And I'm always seeing things. And I'm seeing things that a lot of people don't see. So I think that starts the beginning of it. I see someone, I like their face. I see the light coming in. I'll take a picture.
It's always spontaneous.
It's spontaneous, yeah. My friend Merwin has a beautiful library. I see his library, and I just think that I've got to document that library. So my most recent project with a Gigapan system, putting my Sony camera on the Gigapan and photographing with my interns a entire wall in his studio. He's dead now, he just died. He never wanted the pictures shown while he was alive. So I've respected that. And we shoot 24 pictures of this wall, and then we stitch them together. And I make a life-size photograph that's 13 feet by 12 feet high.
Well, before we move to real estate kind of part, I would like to ask more questions about the 60s and 70s in Venice, in California. That was a incredible period. So tell how you, did you ever work with Ed Moses? Or collaborate with him?
Never worked with him, but when I had my magazine, we photographed him. And I worked with a lot of artists at that time, and this is the 80s. In the 70s, it was mostly my relationship with the artists was just having breakfast with them at the Driftwood Cafe on the beach in Venice, where we'd all go for breakfast. So I met Sam Francis, I met Ed Moses, I met John L. Toon, Freddie Eversley, Valentine. I met them all at the restaurants. And that was our meeting place. It was nothing formal. It was just fun to get to know them.
Well, there is an interesting thing. A lot of young artists abroad who are interested into the American culture, they think that the actual art in U.S. was started in New York, but we know that Andy Warhol as an artist started in California, in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So could you explain how so the California, the movie industry place became a
That's a question that maybe the dealers like Doug Christmas, Peter Gould, various dealers could give you a better answer. The museum people, the Getty Museum, when they did Pacific Standard Time, they studied that question for 15 years and came up with answers in exhibitions. I'm not really qualified to answer that question. In those days, I didn't even think of myself as an artist. I was just Tom Sewell. I was just having fun. I was making stuff. I was making commercials. I was taking pictures. I was documenting things. I didn't really think about my role in the art world or even think about the art world per se. It wasn't in my radar. It was only later, as things start happening, I see where I did fit in and how my view of the art world now is a little bit different. But in those days, I wasn't that conscious of it. It was just all around me, you know?
Well, you lived in the perfect spot.
I fell into heaven. I was really very fortunate. I was living in Hollywood with my girlfriend, and someone just said, you know, there's some cheap studio space in Venice. I said, Venice. So I got on my little motor scooter, my girlfriend on the back, and we went down Venice Boulevard. We saw the ocean. We came up Speedway, which is right on the ocean. I see a house for rent. I rent the house.
For yourself?
Yeah.
So that's how it all started. Later you met Roger.
Then I met Roger. We became friends. And I kind of started the ball rolling in a way with the gentrification. It's funny to look at it now and think of this, but I rented 2 giant warehouses, industrial warehouses on 4th and Sunset in Venice. This is just 1 block up from the Giusta, which is the hottest coffee shop, restaurant, bakery in Venice. Right in that area. But at that time, it was very dangerous. People were getting shot and killed on a weekly basis. And I rented these 2 warehouses for 10 cents a square foot, and I cut them up, and I took a big space for myself, and I rented all the other spaces to artists. That was the first real commercial renting of art space on a large level in Venice. 67, 68, 69, 70, and I had many, many artists that were renting from me.
Okay, so we're moving forward. At the beginning you mentioned that your life separated in kind of 4 sections.
Yes.
I assume maybe even more. But let's move to a new section. You mentioned that in California you started practicing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as I understand, kind of moved you into a completely new period of your life.
Actually, in California, I only did 1 class, and that was with a man named Eric Small, another mentor, wonderful man, who started yoga in a wheelchair. He had multiple sclerosis. And the yoga that he studied helped him. And I did 1 class with him. My friend Paul Bob took me to this class, and I liked this man very much. But I'm a slow learner. I have some learning disabilities, and I learn better in a intensive situation.
You mean physical?
Like 1 month. I'd like to do a 1 month course. I like to do therapy with a group of people. I like intensive situations. So I was hosting a young couple, friends of my girlfriend. They got up in the morning, they did this yoga, ashtanga yoga. I said, what is this? They explained they'd been in Santa Barbara. They'd been doing this yoga with an Indian man who is now in Maui. And he's leading a 1 month intensive. Intensive. Sounded good to me. So I called up, I come over, 50 years old, and I joined the group for 1 month.
Came to Maui?
Came to Maui. That's what brought me to Maui.
Here you met him.
Ashtanga yoga. Changed my life. It was a phenomenal experience. I'd run up and down this street, East Kuya. I love the smell of the street. I'd swim in the ocean. The yoga community was fantastic. The local teacher was great. The Indian man was great. And I got it in my system.
It was your first visit of Hawaii?
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to India for 1 year with this man to really understand the yoga and to live in a small village in the south of India. And then I came back here and I bought this land, and I've been here ever since.
So, Maui, before that California, then Maui, experiencing yoga for 1 month, going to India for 1 year, coming back here and settling down.
Setting up, yes.
Okay, how it's changed you? I assume 1 year living in a country with such different culture. What it changed in your life, your personality?
From living in India?
Yes. Practicing yoga.
Well, I mean, I learned about Ayurveda. Ayurveda medicine, this is this Indian method of medicine, and oils and neti pots. And you know what a neti pot is? When you irrigate your nasal canal, or you do the straw, the cord through the nose, out the mouth.
Yes.
And you'll swallow a 25-foot cloth and bring it up.
Russians love to do that with salt ocean water.
Exactly. So I learned about that. I learned about discipline. I learned about being alone. I learned about being flexible.
Being alone, that means that you were renting a cottage, or where
I rented a house, part of a house in Mysore, and
living alone completely.
Completely alone, celibate, no girlfriend. It was totally different, living in a culture that was so different from mine that I, even a rickshaw would have a little shrine in the front of his rickshaw, and he'd be singing God songs. I mean, that was beautiful. He's driving along, and he's singing to God, singing to Ganesh, to monkey god, to the elephant god, to the tree god. I mean, it was so different from my life. And sweet people, and different food. So the year in India was a wonderful experience.
And how often you were meeting your teacher? Your master?
Every day, 6 days a week.
And for how many hours practicing yoga?
We practiced maybe 2 or 3 hours in the morning.
And what you used to do the rest of the time?
I swim, maybe in the pool, or maybe I'd make some artwork. I had a whole industry set up where I had photographers, I had sewing people, I had a lot of different projects.
You showed me those photos that you did when you shaved yourself, so explain how it came out, because later you made an artwork for that.
Well, I went to the barber with my teacher, and he shaved his head, and he left this little thing in the back. And I thought, I think I'll do that. And it was so different for me to do that, because I thought, this is my ego. I don't want to look weird for women. I'm going to be bald. I thought, oh, well, let's do it. So I shaved the head, and then I'd go each day after class to visit my friend S.A. Raman, the Muslim photographer. And we would talk photography, and we would take pictures in his photo booth machine. He had a photo booth that he did photos for identity pictures for Indian people. So every day I'd take these pictures. So I'd end up with hundreds of portraits of me with the bald head, and I'd give them to my sewing man, and I'd have him sew them into a book, and I'd have these pages of photographs in books. And then when I dream, I have a habit of, when I dream at night, I wake up at 3 a.m. and I write the dream down and I do a drawing. So all those drawings that you see are basically from my dreams. So I would draw on those little photo booth pictures. Later, I blow them up and I make things out of them. But it started the whole process of dream catchers. I think dreams are very valuable, but they go through your hand like quicksand, like water. You've got to catch them at just the right time. 3 a.m. is a pretty good time. You really train yourself. I have my flashlight, I have my book, I have my pen. I wake up and in an unconscious mode, I write the dream and I do a drawing. And in my library, I have stacks of these books, these dream books.
Well, I assume most of people live their lives without taking care of the dreams, never reading them or interpreting them. What was your relationship with Buddhism?
Nothing particular other than appreciating the fact that the Buddhists are, there were Buddhists and there were Hindus, but the Buddhists were so compassionate. I appreciated that very much. And the idea of loving everyone, and everyone's got a soul, and you're just looking at that soul. You're not looking at anything else. And you appreciate everybody. You know, you almost want to cry when you meet someone who's so sweet. So I think I learned that from Buddhism.
Well, we can move slightly to real estate. Well, we know that you started all this long time ago in Venice and later step by step with Roger Mona. For how long you collaborated together?
50 years. We're still partners.
Still partners.
He saw what I was doing with the warehouses and releasing to artists. And he said, if you ever want to buy a building, let's buy one together. I'd never thought about partnership, but now I realize partnership is one of my things that makes me successful. Partnerships, many partnerships. I have one partnership on the back 10 acres here with a man named Boyd Willett. I have a partnership on my studio down the hill with a man named Dennis Gassner, production designer, artist, friend, and we collaborated to make that studio. I have a partnership with Mona in Venice in real estate and art. I have a partnership with my wife. Partnerships are really important to me. So he saw what I was doing and he said, would you like to buy a building together? Let me know if you do. And so I had another mentor named Michael Hernandez who lived next door to me, who was in real estate, just kind of getting into real estate. He was parking cars at the Miramar Hotel at night and in daytime studying real estate. And he helped me buy my first house. I was selling Fuller brush door to door. I was a door-to-door salesman in Venice in '69. And I saw a house for sale. It was a probate house. The woman had died. She was a circus performer, and she was retired. She was living in Venice. She died, and her cats ate her up. And it was a kind of a haunted house, and nobody wanted to buy it. But Michael and I went to the probate hearing, and he showed me how to buy a house for 10% down. There were all these people there looking at the house, and the first man stood up and he said, I bid $15,000 for this house. I said to Michael, let's go. I don't have that kind of money. He said, just a minute. So he talked to the judge, he talked to the broker, and the judge said, are there any more bids? And Michael says, yes, I'm bidding for Tom Sewell $16,000, 10% down. And the judge said, sold. So I was able to buy this house for $1,600. It was a remarkable deal. Spanish house, 2 stories high, in Venice, on a beautiful street. And my girlfriend at the time, Christine Fulbright, her father had just died. And the next day, her cousin comes to tell her that she's just got $1,600 from her father's estate. So we took that money and bought the house. And that's how I got into real estate, just on a fluke. It was just crazy. And so the same man, Michael, tells me there's a building for sale on what's now Abbott Kinney, but in those days it was called West Washington Boulevard. He said, there's a building for sale. You can get it for $40,000, 10% down. $4,000 down. Big brick building, beautiful. So I told Roger, and we bought it together. We each kicked in $2,000. I had to borrow the $2,000 to get in from a painter that painted my house, but I was able to get the money, the $2,000. He put in $2,000, and that's how we started in this fabulous old building that I then cut up, rented out to artists and shopkeepers. I called it the supermarket. I rented to an artist named Linda Banglis, who's quite famous now, and other people. So we started this business, Sewell and Webster. And little by little, we just would buy buildings and fix them up and give them names and uses and create value where there was no value, create interest in something where there was no interest, and create some kind of magic that people wanted to be around.
Well,
I wanted to tell you a little story about magic. I believe in magic and I expect magic. And each day something happens in my life that is wonderful. Meeting you guys was magic. I think it was great. When Matthew called and he said, there's a cellist from Moscow wants to come. Fabulous, I bring him over, you know. So one day my friend David Greenberg calls me, says, I've got a guy coming to stay in my treehouse in Hana, but he's coming in late at night. Could he stay at your treehouse? I said, sure. So the man comes, spends the night in the treehouse with his girlfriend. I come up and get him to come up. We have a coffee. I take him to my studio and I show him what I'm doing. I'm making a book about my French muse, Chloe, a book of photographs. They're very erotic, very interesting black and white photographs. I show him. He says, could you send some of these pictures to me in New York? He says, I'm with Sports Illustrated. I'd like to show them to some of my people there. So I send him some pictures. The next thing I know, I get a call. He says, would you be willing to shoot for our swimsuit issue? Of course I would. I mean, photographers would kill to do that job. So they send me these two beautiful women, one from New York, a black girl, and one from Brazil. And I shoot them and they publish them in the magazine, Sports Illustrated. Then they do a book, a hardcover book, and they put them in there.
how much they paid you for this?
What?
How much they paid you for
Oh, I didn't even remember. I didn't do it for the money. It was just fun. I mean, they gave me royalties for a while, but it was just a fun project.
You took all those photos?
And not all these photos. This was a book.
There are six, I can see 6 artists, right, in this book, 6 photographers.
Yeah, 6 photographers.
Oh.
So,
You shot them in Maui?
yeah, I shot them here on the property and in an abandoned sugar mill. Here we go. So I consider this magic, to be able to do this kind of a job with this magazine and these people. I mean, it was just so spontaneous and so fun. This is Mickey Eskimo's old abandoned mill, and my assistants helped me shoot the pictures. So,
Well, here we go.
just a little example
Take your camera and
of magic. Huh? A final note about magic. I've just discovered 2 children I didn't know I had. A boy 44 and a woman 54.
from.
The 54-year-old woman, her mother was my girlfriend for 6 months in Minneapolis. She was a little Catholic girl that would come up to my art gallery after school in her little uniform. And I took a liking to her. And we had great sex, and I taught her about art and music and culture and opera and classical music, and we had a great affair for 6 or 8 months, and then we separated. I didn't realize she was pregnant. Her folks were very strict Catholics, and they sent her to Seattle to have the baby. Judith, the mother, eventually went back to Minneapolis, subsequently died of a brain tumor. The girl was raised by a Catholic family in Seattle, always knew she was adopted, but 10 years ago she started looking for her birth family. Hired a detective, they finally did 23andMe, the gene testing, and she found me. I get a phone call, and I said, oh my God, I had no idea that Judith was pregnant and that you were the result. I said, of course I want to meet you. So we got together, I went to Seattle, we met, we hugged each other. She's got a great smile, and she's got gray curly hair, and she's got 2 kids, she's married, and we're good friends now. And she's coming to my birthday this December. The boy, 44 years old, his mom was my girlfriend in Venice in the late 60s, early 70s. She lived across the street from me. We had a great affair. Again, 6, 8 months. We separated. She married a man named Abe Lopez, a Mexican dentist from Newport Beach. They had a child. Shortly after she had the child, she came to visit me for one last afternoon of sex. This is 71, 72, free love. Seemed like the right thing to do. She told me later she was pregnant. She told me later that she had a boy named Sasha, but she never told the boy, and she never told her husband. Subsequently, years later, I wrote her a letter. I said, does Sasha know I'm his biological father? I never heard from her.
Is it possible that her husband didn't realize that?
He didn't know a thing. She didn't see the letter. So the husband dies, the mother dies, the boy inherits the house, and he's going through the stuff, throwing things away, and he comes to this letter, and he's just about ready to throw it out, and he says, does Sasha know I'm his biological father? And he sees who the letter's from, my name, and he's frozen. He can't believe it. He can't move. For hours, he just sits and looks at this letter. Finally, 2 months later, he calls me. His wife insisted, call Tom. He calls me. We get together. We go to Starbucks in Long Beach. He walks in the door, big, tall fellow, my height exactly, nice smile, a little bit gray around the temples. And I just went over and I put my arms around him and just started to cry. It was so beautiful. He was my son. I could feel his heart beating. It was like magic, just magic.
Other kids?
And he had 2 kids. That's all I have. So I have 3 children. They'll all be here for my birthday on December 14th.
And third one?
The first one is when I was married when I was 17, and my girlfriend got pregnant, and I married her. And this is an official son. He's 61 years old now.
So he's coming as well?
He's coming as well, yeah.
On December
14, yeah. 4-score. I'll be 4-score.
Absolutely. It's a very good number in the Buddhist culture.
Yes.
Well, last just 2 questions before we finish this interview. We started to talk about it, but we never came to the resolution. Alter ego, do you have it?
Alter ego.
Yes.
I never think about it much, but
So let's think about it.
if there were an alter ego, it would be Duchamp. He was a mischievous man. He was very sexy. He had a lot of erotic ideas, and he was completely blasphemous. He didn't really like the art world. He didn't really like all the he'd enter shows and he'd get rejected. They'd throw him out. He did the urinal. They threw him out of that. They nude descending a staircase. They threw him out of a show for that. They said that's not the proper way to show a nude. Descending a staircase, they should be on a pedestal. Everything he did was radical. And there's a little of that in me, I think. I'm sort of an outsider artist. I'm not really an insider artist. You know, I don't really fit that well into the art world. I never did in Venice, and I barely do it here. I was lucky enough to have one, you know, big show here, but that's about it. So I'm sort of an outsider, in a way, naive and visionary artist, I think you might say. And I think there's a lot of Duchamp in me.
That's probably the love to chess as well.
And a love of chess, yes.
Do you believe in anything?
I believe in the goodness of people. I believe in positive people. I believe in, I'm an optimistic person. I'm always looking at the good. I don't complain about drivers when they're making bad mistakes around me. I don't complain about waiters that are rude. I don't complain about anything. I'm just always, I believe in compassion and acceptance, and I believe in not making anybody wrong. I had a marvelous mentor here who died about 10 years ago. His name was Rubach, and he was a firm believer in not making anybody wrong, to the extent that he even forgave the man who accidentally shot his daughter in Las Vegas. He had performed some robbery, and he was running with his gun, and he fell. The gun went off, and it killed my friend's daughter. And he even forgave him for that. I mean, it's just, he forgave his son, who's a drug addict. He was a very good example of someone that just had a big open heart and forgave everybody. So I'd say, yes, I believe in those things. I don't have any particular spiritual bent. I mean, I lean more towards Buddhism than anything else. But in terms of spiritual, the thing I like about the spiritual world is the music. And that's universal. Every religion, I love the music.
That's true.
Makes me cry, I just even thinking about it, you know. I mean, right now I'm enjoying music from Morocco and the wonderful tunes from Morocco. They touched me so deeply. We took a trip to Morocco, to Marrakesh, and I just heard music there that was so special. So right now I'm appreciating that. I like music from films also. We have our film club. We've seen over almost 500 films every Monday night, and I love the soundtracks. I collect them. I'm looking to, these days I'm really fond of Belatar, Romanian or Hungarian director, and his music. I love that.
Well, thank you. Dom Sewell.
Thank you.